We're live, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Adult Social Care Scrutiny Panel February meeting. Attending today, we have the Scrutiny Panel and Democratic Services personnel. We also have in attendance Eric Scully, Director of Social Care and Health Integration, and Lynn Beavers, Lead Social Worker for Adults. Both will be given a verbal update on their services. We'll go on to the agenda. Any apologies for absence?
Chair, we have apologies for absence from Councillor Donna Jones. Thank you.
Have we got any declarations of interest? Don't see any hands, so let's say that is no, Susie. Item 3, the minutes of the meeting in December and January. Thank you, Susie, for all the work you did in these two meetings. Can we have someone to approve December first of all?
Approve those, Chair.
Okay, and a seconder?
A second, Chair. Oh, got it.
Okay, thank you. And can we have somebody to approve of the January minutes?
I propose those, Chair.
Thank you, Jeanette. And can we have a seconder, please?
Second that, Jim.
Yes, Graham Wilson. That's great. Thank you. And we'll go on to item 4, and we'll hand it over to Eric for an update on the. Eric is the Director of Social Care and Health Integration, and he's going to provide us with a verbal update.
Thank you, Chair. I'll start by saying I don't think there have been any significant organisational milestones sort of met since the last time we met in terms of the overall progress of health and social integration, health and social care integration, for the simple reason that the respective organisations have been almost entirely focused on the COVID response, and I don't think you'd expect me to say much different. And I think the thing that has been occupying the majority of our time since last we spoke was preparations around the vaccination programme. So I can report that from my perspective, Middlesbrough is well on track to deliver the kind of the government target of vaccinating the first 4 priority groups by the date in February, which they established. We've worked very closely, and I think specifically recognise the work that our contracts and commissioning team have put in over the last month or months in terms of supporting James Cook University Hospital and coordinating vaccinations, because they have dealt with the lists to allow our residential care home workers, our domiciliary care staff, all our commission providers and our own frontline health and social care workers to get booked in for their vaccinations up at James Cook. And that's gone, from my perspective, extraordinarily well for us. And we're seeing now the vaccination programme in terms of the primary care networks swinging into action. And I think, you know, the Northeast as a region is at the forefront of the kind of the work on vaccinations. Gone really well. But behind that, there have been hours and hours of efforts at all hours of the day and the weekends and whatnot put in by our contracts commissioning team. So I'd like to take the opportunity to thank them for that. It's also fair to say that the hospital social work team and the processes associated with hospital discharge have been particularly busy over the last few weeks. We saw for a period our designated settings, which you'll remember were the care homes that were specifically assured to receive hospital discharges for people who were COVID positive. Initially, those beds were actually quite quiet, but we've seen an uptick in the number of people. Now, this is not to do with an uptick in the number of cases overall, but people who have been ready to be discharged from hospital into care home beds who are still COVID positive, because the reason that the designated settings bed were not used significantly in the initial period of their existence was we were finding that people who were COVID positive were too unwell to be discharged, and by the time they were well enough physically to be discharged from hospital, they'd undergone the isolation period that would have seen them necessarily discharged into a designated settings bed. But those beds have been quite busy recently, so we're keeping an eye on that at the moment. And this lockdown, we've continued operating, albeit with certain additional restrictions, our daycare, which we hadn't done in the last lockdown, and that was something that we explored, I think, very carefully this time round, particularly since there were ideas about the increased transmissibility of the variant that everybody was focused on then, which was the kind of the Kent variant. But we took the decision that we would continue to operate daycare, and that was very much based on the fact that although we closed in that first lockdown period, in the intervening months, we'd actually got much better at conducting, at establishing what risk assessment needed to be in place, what safe operating procedures looked like. We felt confident to go in, and I suppose taking into account also the wishes and aspirations of the individuals using the services, because we're going to touch on this later when we talk about carers. Any decision to close a daycare facility is not something you want to take lightly, because of the knock-on impact on carers and families, as well as the individuals themselves. So we went into this lockdown with the intention of continuing with our daycare services, which we've done. And I think really just to kind of round up, from an adult social care perspective, it's been phenomenally busy over the period. I've highlighted a few elements, but right across the board, our social workers, our social care workers, our occupational therapists, our in-house services, everybody's very, very busy at the moment. And I think we're although we're very much still in the process of managing the pandemic, working in response to that, we're also seeing some aspects of work kind of come alive again. People are asking questions about other elements of business which had been sort of parked in terms of the questions during the kind of early elements of the pandemic. So in a way, I think we're probably spread as thinly as we've ever been at any stage. People are tired. I think people's resilience has probably been affected. I know mine has, by the last year or so. That's kind of inevitable. So I think we're looking out very closely, I think, at the well-being of our staff at the moment, and I think we're also starting to ask some of the questions about what the longer-term impact will be on well-being of staff and resilience. And I'll stop there. I can ramble on all day, Chair, but I think those are the pertinent points for the moment.
Thank you. Can I just ask you, have all our care homes patients been vaccinated, and the care workers that work within them?
Well, I'm not going to give you, because I don't have an absolute up-to-date figure to allow me to categorically say the offer has been made to all of those staff members and all of those residents. It will be by the middle of February. And my understanding last time I looked on this, which was some days ago, was that at that point they would have anticipated by today I would have been able to say yes to that, but I haven't had an absolute confirmation of that yet. We're there or thereabouts at the moment, Chair, and we will be certainly by the middle of February.
That's great. Thank you. Anyone else have a question for Eric? Graham?
Eric, this the housebound residents, you got any further forward to getting the home vaccinated at home, anything like that?
I think that's one that sits with the primary care networks at the moment, Councillor Wilson. I mean, there's a substantial number of individuals who I think fall into that category. They will be on the caseloads if they're within the priority groups of the GP practices. So I don't know quite how that gets delivered, but it won't be forgotten about, and there will be a solution to that. I know that in some areas further north in the patch, they've used, for instance, pharmacists to do that. I don't know what the current plan is at the moment, but it hasn't been overlooked.
Right, thanks, Eric.
Okay. Anyone else? No. Can I ask, has any of the panel been vaccinated yet? Put your hand up. Jeanette. Great. 2, that's great. Right, Eric, I don't think there's any more questions for you, so we'll move on to Lynn. Thank you, Eric.
You're welcome, Chair. Can I just introduce Lynn Beavers is our principal social worker. There are a number of kind of statutory roles within adult social care. Principal social worker is one of them. And I forget how long Lynn has been the principal social worker. Lynn joined Middlesbrough Council pretty much exactly the same time I did, doing the same role, 13 and a bit years ago. So
that's right.
Lynn knows everything and more than I do.
Oh, thank you, Eric. Thanks for asking me today to talk to you about carers. And I thought I'd just start off with a little bit of background about the impact of caring, really. In 2011, a UK census showed that there were approximately 6.5 million people of all ages providing unpaid care. And a 2019 poll published by Carers UK indicates that the number could now be closer to 8.8 million. And the number of people aged 65 years or over has also grown from 1.4 million in 2011 to potentially over 2 million in 2019. 2011 census information showed that there were 166,000 young carers between the ages of 5 to 17 providing support to a parent or sibling with illnesses or disabilities in the UK. And the Children's Society estimate that this figure is now closer to 800,000, largely due to the number of young carers who remain unidentified. And data also shows that there are approximately 2,500 young or young adult carers across the South East area between the ages of 0 to 24. In 2019, 8,000 current and former carers shared their experience and helped form the State of the Caring report in 2019. 39% responding to the national survey said they are struggling to make ends meet. 68% reported regularly using their own income or savings to pay for care or support services, equipment or provisions for the person that they care for. 12% of carers reported that they or those they supported received less care or support services during the previous year due to a reduction in the amount of support from social services. 53% of carers said that they are not able to save for their retirement, and 64% said that they are focused on the care needs of the person they care for and not on their own needs. And I just wanted to mention the impact of COVID-19 as well, and a brief summary on the national findings. So passing on the virus to those that they care for has been concerning carers since the start of the pandemic, with many shielding or choosing to shield. Some have moved away from their families to live in and provide care. Every day of the pandemic, carers have been providing care worth £530 million. 81% of carers have taken on more care. 64% have not had a break during the pandemic. And local authorities are seeing an increase in numbers of carers asking for help because of the pandemic. And I wanted to just briefly mention our council statutory duties and responsibilities. The Care Act 2014 put in place significant rights for carers in England, including a focus on promoting carers' well-being, a duty on local authorities to prevent, reduce and delay the need for support, including the needs of carers, a right to a carers assessment based on the appearance of needs, and a right to carers' eligible services to be met, and a duty on local authorities to provide information and advice to carers in relation to their caring role and their own needs. Middlesbrough Council works closely with Carers Together, The Junction, MVDA, Mind and other local agencies to promote information and services to carers. And carers may choose to receive support from these agencies, including advice, signposting, support groups, counselling, or they may wish to approach adult social care directly. Adult social care also offers advice and guidance, signposting and links to local resources, as well as providing support directly. And this direct support can often include practical support for the cared for person. So social work teams would complete a needs-led assessment for the cared for person. We would talk to the carer, and it may be appropriate to provide additional care and support for the cared for person in order to better support the carer. This is especially useful around contingency planning if people are concerned about their ongoing health and well-being. It would also include things like domiciliary care, personal care, sitting services to give the carer a break, attendance at a day centre or respite care. And we can also provide practical support for carers themselves. And All carers are offered an assessment in their own right to establish the effects of the caring role, what effects it's having, and whether this is having a significant impact on their well-being. We provide services, usually via a direct payment, to support the carer in their caring role. And direct payments give carers more choice and control over the support they receive, which often includes, but is not limited to, assistance with domestic routines such as gardening or housework, taxi fares or transport, gym membership, recreation, therapeutic interventions, provision of equipment. So it really gives us the scope to listen to what people are needing and what they feel would help, and we can be quite creative with people. And Middlesbrough Council do not ask carers to contribute financially towards the cost of the services they receive in their own right. In the first 9 months of this financial year, 2,780 carers assessments were offered to carers in Middlesbrough, and this is a significant increase on the previous year, 1920, when 1,900 carers assessments were offered, and that was for a 12-month period. And I just wanted to mention the future. Redcar and Cleveland Borough Council, Middlesbrough Council and South Tees CCG are working on an integrated commissioning model scheduled to be tendered in June with a start date of October this year. And going forward, a commissioning subgroup comprising the statutory sector colleagues from health and social care will help shape the pending specifications. It's anticipated that a collaborative model will be developed for organisations to work together to provide a holistic offer across South Tees. And the developing forum covering Middlesbrough Borough Council and Redcar Council areas consists of over 120 members, working with 5 focus groups examining the key themes in the National Carers Action Plan 2018 to 20. And the work of the forum is helping shape the pending commission. The key themes form the basis of the draft South East Carers strategy that will outline the strategic direction over the next 3 to 5 years. I also wanted to mention the core commission support services that we already have in place. We've got Adult Carers Outreach Service, which is provided by Carers Together. We've got a Young Carers Service delivered by the Junction Foundation, Young Carers Schools Project delivered by the Junction Foundation, We Care You Care communication and campaigns delivered by MVDA, Middlesbrough Council and Redcar Council and South Tees Hospital Project delivered by Carers Together, which aims to identify hidden carers when they're admitted into hospital. And there's a mental health project delivered by Middlesbrough and Stockton Mind. And moving forward, we've got young adult carers, and the Junction Foundation in partnership with Carers Together were successful in securing short-term funding from Commitment to Carers Mind the Gap project funded by the NHS England and NHS Improvement. We've also got Active Mind Bags, which was a 3 to 6 month pilot to provide memory bags and management by Middlesbrough's library service to help people with dementia, although that's taken a bit of a back seat lately with the pandemic. And we're also looking at providing a dementia advisory service, and we're hoping to relocate that to the dementia hub at Woodside, which is just opposite James Cook, which I think will be an excellent service which will be readily accessible for people who care for people with dementia. That's kind of where we're at the moment. There's lots of exciting things going on, but I think you'll see that, you know, there is an increased demand from carers that are contacting us, and either directly or via Carers Together. So we're making every effort to support them.
Oh, thank you, Lynn. It's quite a alarming report, and we must say the carers do a fantastic job. And what will we do without them? I suppose the question I would ask you is, what can the council do to help you?
Oh, that's an
Yeah.
unexpected
You
question.
You obviously need some help with those figures.
It's very busy. I mean, we do try and accommodate care as part of our routine role. So whenever we're assessing anybody, you know, we talk to carers routinely. I think it's just really trying to raise the profile of carers and acknowledge what they're doing and thanking them. I do know that Newcastle Council have originally tried to raise the profile of carers and maybe suggested that carers allowance might be increased, and I think they were going to ask the local MPs to send a letter to try and support that. But that's more of a national movement. But yeah, I think it's raising the profile and never forgetting that they're there and how much we rely on them.
Okay, thank you. Eric, you want to come in?
Yeah, there's a couple of things, Chair, that I'd say on the back of the very fulsome summary that Lynn has presented for us. I think as the director, I mean, I would say that you can't overstate the extent to which we rely as a local authority and nationally on informal carers. The overall contribution made is vast, and I'm talking about, you know, a sort of contribution to the national economy almost, because the amount of time and effort that the informal carers put in. If we had to try and fund that through, you know, local authority resources or national resources, it would be cripplingly large. You've seen the statistics about the number of carers. So that's an enormously important sort of segment of our population are carers, and we rely really heavily on that. Throughout the pandemic, the pressure on carers has unquestionably increased and become more acute. And you know, so when I talked to you earlier about the impact on our social care staff in terms of their resilience and whatnot, you know, this is our job. We go home at the end of the night, but for carers, you know, for some individuals, it's made it very difficult for them to get any sort of relief or respite from the pressures of carers. And I'm conscious about the sort of language that I use if I'm using clinical language, because, you know, lots of carers don't really articulate themselves as carers. They're mothers, fathers, partners, you know, husbands, wives, whatever. And the kind of, sometimes the language talking about carers feels a little bit clunky. But we all know those individuals out there who are contributing that caring role, and they've been under particular pressure throughout the period of COVID. One of the really important things that happened, you know, relatively recently in terms of my career is that when we came away from the NHS and Community Care Act as our old legislation and came towards the current Care Act as our primary legislation, was the kind of the shift in the place that carers are within the legislation. So it used to be we'd go out and we'd assess the needs of the service user, you know, and sometimes you'd end up doing a kind of a carers assessment on the side sort of thing. And I'm being slightly flippant about that. The way the law compels us to work now is to think about the significance of carers as being on a par with the significance of the service user we're out to work with. So, you know, it's no longer the case as it was effectively in the past that, you know, sometimes carers would ask you for an assessment, and we're now required in law to observe the need to offer a carer's assessment. You see someone acting in the role of a carer, the responsibility is on us to spot that and to flag that and to make that offer of the assessment, and then to treat their needs as being just as important as the needs of the service user that we're working with. So there's no ambiguity about that now. So I suppose, you know, you're asking, and I'm giving you a long-winded answer to what can the council do to support adult social care. There is an as yet unquantified impact of the pandemic on carers, and actually there may be a lot more work that we need to be doing to support informal carers in Middlesbrough. And at the moment, our social workers are flat out running to stand still with the work that they've got at the moment. So it may well be that the pandemic and the increased pressure for carers creates a bit of a deficit in terms of the work that we need to do within adult social care and the available resource we've got in terms of the bodies to do the assessments. So we've got support services around us. Lynn's articulated some of the services that we commission and whatnot, but at the core of this, we've got to do the assessments with the social workers, work up the support plan, support those carers. And at the moment, I'm left with this question about whether or not there is a gap between the resource we have and the demand that will be coming in terms of support for carers. So that's a potential ask. I don't know it's necessarily an ask, but actually there might be an ask in terms of the priority we give to this piece of work versus some other pieces of work within the local authority, he said diplomatically.
Okay, thank you. Denise wanted to come in?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I've got a number of questions, if that's all right, and I think Eric's probably answered in part the first one. It was about how carers understand or find out that they're entitled to some of this help. I'd like to know which areas are means tested, if at all, because I think Lynn did touch on that a little bit. And with the direct payment, what assistance is given to help a carer manage those responsibilities? Because in effect, they become employees in terms of buying in a service. Thanks. I've got more, but I'll leave them for now.
Okay. How people receive information and find out about services. I mean, we work with colleagues and also ourselves to try and publicise and raise the profile of carers, but also to work with carers to try and see themselves as a carer, which is often the barrier, as as Eric mentioned, that they just say, I'm just looking after my husband or my mum, so it's just what's expected. It's getting carers to think of themselves as carers is often the first step, and we look at providing information in GP surgeries or hospitals or via Facebook or local means like that to try and raise the profile, and we also try and raise the profile whenever we're approached to complete assessments for people. We always talk to people who are involved in their life to try and identify hidden carers. But it is an ongoing battle to try and get people to see themselves as a carer, which is the first step, I think, to often coming forward and asking for help. Because there is quite a lot of help out there, but you need to be in that mindset in the first place. Means tested. We don't means test for any carer services. So if we're providing a service for a carer, that is free for the carer. If we're providing services to the cared for person, those services are means tested. So we might talk to a carer and they're struggling with a particular aspect. We might want to increase the care for the cared for person, which would give them a break, but we would need to do a means tested assessment for the care for the person. And direct payments, that's a really good flexible way that we can actually support carers. So if we were putting in a direct payment for the cared for person, that would be means tested, and we would have other support services like penderels or dads to help them. The kind of support we tend to put in for carers tends to be more therapeutic things, or sometimes the cost of driving lessons or transport or those sorts of things. So they're not actually employing somebody, they're more purchasing a service to support them. So they would just need to submit receipts to us. So that system is designed to be quite simple and quite straightforward in that regard. So a direct payment for a carer is as complicated and onerous as if they were actually employing somebody themselves. Does that answer?
Yes, it does. Thanks.
Yeah,
thank you.
May I add a bit
Yes,
more to that? The issue about hidden carers and about how we identify individuals who are carers, I think that's always been a bit of a challenge, and what we probably need to think about is that we're not the only sort of statutory organisation with a duty around carers, and I think we need to think that often the individuals who get referred to as a shorthand as kind of hidden carers, or individuals who don't think of themselves as carers, there are touch points with the state that all those individuals have. People will in all likelihood be seeing their GP, they may be going to hospital appointments, they may be at they may be at the benefits agency, the post office, wherever people go. And I know it's a bit different in the pandemic, whatever, but it's the part that those organisations can play, because really the people that come to our door within adult social care are already generally got a fairly substantial problem and are on the radar. And I sometimes wonder whether or not there might be more that can be done through the NHS in terms of elevating the carers issues and to help with people identifying as carers. And those are conversations that we've had on a number of occasions with the CCG and with the hospital locally. But anything to do with raising the profile, the NHS is a good way of doing that. And the other thing about means testing, we don't means test for our services, but I think Lynn mentioned, was it Newcastle potentially writing to government talking about raising
I think that was the
carers allowance, was it?
To increase carers allowance as a recognition
Yeah,
for all the hard work. So
I mean, carers allowance doesn't seem very much when you think about the time and effort that goes into the support that carers on average are kind of putting in. It seems very, very small. And although carers allowance isn't means tested, lots of the individuals who receive carers allowance are also in receipt of means tested benefits. So if you bump up their carers allowance, there's a danger that you bump down their means tested benefits by an equivalent amount. So actually just increasing carers allowance might be seen as being a bit of a blunt instrument, because it will have a variable impact on carers. Some carers will get the full benefit of an increase, and some won't because of the impact of means tested benefits. But I would wholeheartedly I agree that it would be useful for carers to be better remunerated for what they do. That's all, Chair.
But answer your question, Denise?
Yes, Chair. As I said, I might have some more, but I'll bring them in later on. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. I think Jeanette wanted to come in. Jeanette?
Yeah, and thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, I mean, Eric did answer a couple of the things, and so did Lynn, that I was going to ask. One of the situations that I'm quite concerned about, and I think Eric actually said about it, is carers who also need care, who will lead up to them getting care as well, being assessed at the same time as the person they're caring for. And I think that is quite essential. I know of many couples that where the one partner who they're looking after is getting quite older, a lot older, but they themselves would also qualify for some of that care, but they don't see themselves as qualified for that care.
that's right.
And I honestly believe that, and I know of a few people like that, and I think to myself, well, surely it would be wise, maybe, it depends on who assesses them and how the assessment's done, that those questions could be asked as part of a rounder assessment to the person who's being cared for, to include answers from the carer as well. Do you see what I mean? So you would be finding out how capable, how fit, well needs are of the carer as well as the person being cared for. I just think it's an idea, because there's been times that I've seen where the cared for person is allowed to have certain things, but the carer could also do with them as well, and they're not going to get them. So, and I'm just a little bit. I think that would be ideal to see some kind of protocol, I think, written around that, as to people to have who is caring for who and how capable, what their needs are. I think it's brilliant.
Can I have a bash at answering that?
That's unusual. That's unusual.
As the person that sits behind a desk all the time, I'm going to try and answer this question and see whether our principal social worker reckons my answer stands up. I think that the one of the difficulties, and it's one of the things that I think makes being a social worker just a fabulous job, is that although we work within statutory frameworks and the law all the time, people are just more complicated than that. So we talk about people that are receiving care and people that are carers. You know, a lot of the people that we refer to as carers in the context of this conversation, they don't really want to be thought about as carers. They, you know, and if I compel them to be called a carer or use that language around them, it kind of compounds the problem more than resolves it. So Lynn and I will both have loads of personal examples from when we've been, you know, working as social workers in the field of going out to couples. And really, you don't know who's the carer and who's the cared for individual. You get people that are in these, I think, marvelous kind of heartwarming codependencies sometimes, where they both do complementary elements of the tasks that need to be done. And I think you're right that we could try and write a protocol to address that. But what I'm absolutely certain of is that as soon as I've written that protocol, I will find another situation that the protocol is just not quite complex enough to kind of sort out, because the way people live their lives, as you well know, it's just so complicated. So what we need then is social workers with, you know, knowledge of the law and how to apply it, but also with common sense and empathy and experience, and that, you know, and social workers have got social in the title for a reason, because it's about trying to build that relationship. It's about feeling your way into a relationship with the couple or the two people you're going to talk to, and then just trying to work out what their respective needs are and how you're best going to meet that. And that might be, we've got plenty of couples where it's a bit of a moot point whether or not they're a carer or a service user. The problem comes where you run across bits that are means tested and bits that aren't means tested, and those really need to be assessed on a kind of case by case basis. But I think that the kind of the dilemma of who's the carer and who's the cared for person, I think we encounter that quite regularly, and I'm hoping Lynn would agree. Sure, Lynn agrees.
Yeah, we do, and I think we're quite flexible, and I like to think that we're quite good at having a look at the situation and trying to treat people as individuals and apply the services that are best going to help them in their particular situation. So people might start off being a carer and then have an assessment in their own right, you know, so it can be quite fluid. I think, as Eric said, a lot of the time it's just establishing trust so that you can start to have a meaningful conversation and dialogue with people, so that you can continue to offer support as things change. I'm particularly thinking about parents who are looking after the children who've got long-term disabilities, you know, as they age and require more assistance themselves. It's having that relationship so that we can step in gradually and support people, so it's not a massive change, you know, and that people are involved. So that's our hope, that we're involved and we're flexible and we listen to people all the time. So there is an option for carers needs to be considered as part of the cared for person, so people can either have an assessment separately or together. It's really the best way to get people the support that they need that we're looking at.
Yeah, Chair, can I just say that one of the things that I'm looking at is maybe more of a holistic service to encompass that family unit. You know, I mean, when we treat troubled children, we look at the family, and we try to treat not just the person with the issues, but the whole family. And I think sometimes we've got to do that with people who are being cared for within those units as well. It's just an idea. I mean, it could be absolutely no good, and what's happening now is the best we can do for the time being. But I think also, as time progresses with those cared for people, then obviously that carer, their needs will change as well, their health needs. And if they're going to, as Eric pointed out, they'll go to hospital appointments for issues and problems that they might not have had when the first assessment was done. Do you see what I mean? So it changes as they go along. And I think it's giving them the option to renew their needs as well at the same time. And I think to upgrade, maybe a little update, you know, let's have a little update, see how things are working out, what really, you know, is there anything else that needs to be doing? I don't know whether that's looked at on a regular routine basis. I don't know. So Correct me if
We,
I'm wrong, Eric.
No, I agree with everything you're saying, Councillor. I think, you know, trying to look at a situation in a holistic way is absolutely what we would hope social workers do. The problem then is where you come across a group of individuals and you've got different pieces of legislation that seem to fit for different individuals within that household, and sometimes the bits of legislation don't always sit all that harmoniously together. And that's sometimes the problem that we see. But in principle, I absolutely agree. And I agree, we when we look at carers, we also look at a kind of reviewing process with those individuals as well, that would happen at least as regularly as we would look at reviewing the individuals who are cared for. So I agree with everything you're saying.
Anyone else
Thank you
have any
very much.
questions?
Thank you, Chair.
Denise?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just looking at the South Tees Carers Forum that you referred to, Lynn, I think it would be really interesting to hear from them if there's a representative that could come along to this meeting. I don't know how practical it would be to arrange, because I know we're in really difficult times, but if it's possible to get something from them, either personally or even in writing, if that's not practical, because I mean they're obviously working on some key areas, and it would be interesting to hear from them for the work that they're doing, but also their experiences.
Yes, there's a number of, I think there's 5 different strands that are meeting at the moment to try and work out the tender and the services that we want to have in place across Tees. So I could definitely look into discussing issues with them, or whether it might be more appropriate to have them to come back once they've finalised what they're thinking of doing, and maybe bring back the outcome of the tender, so that you're aware of what is going to be happening. Would that be something that'd be useful, do you think, or would you like something a little sooner?
I think in the earliest stages, I think we'd like to hear from carers and some of the difficulties that they're facing, perhaps. And it may be that, I mean, I'm thinking ahead here without knowing anything at all about it, but the tender process will still be restricted in what will be paid for, and whether there are any areas that won't be met as part of that. And I think that would be an interesting thing to look at, if there is anything like that. As I said, I haven't read the document, so I don't know.
No,
I'm just trying to think a bit.
it's a bit of a work in progress at the moment, because we're still doing quite a lot of fact finding to try and map services and commission. But we can definitely ask somebody to come and bring you an update about what the current thinking is.
Yeah, through you, Chair. I think that would be really helpful. And yeah, we don't want to preempt or jump the gun on something that isn't ready for us to look at. But yeah, thanks.
Okay.
Okay, sorry, I couldn't unmute there. Anyone else any questions before we let Lynn and Eric depart? No? Well, I think we all agree that the carers do a fantastic job, Lynn, and that should be recognised, and we thank you all. Thank them all on our behalf. And thank you, and Eric, for coming along and giving us that update.
Our pleasure, Chair.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Right, I shall take my leave. Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Right, we'll move on to item 6, which is the OSB update.
Chair, can I just come in there before we move on?
Yes.
Is that all right?
Yep,
Sorry, I
yep.
just obviously I just wanted to discuss with the panel where you'd like to go, because obviously that was just the first kind of setting the scene presentation on support for carers, and I know obviously that the panel were keen to kind of undertake an investigation into what support there is for carers in the local authority. So if it's in agreement with you, Chair, obviously Councillor Rooney and Councillor Jeanette Walker mentioned a few things there that they'd like to look at. So if it's in agreement with you, I could bring back some draft terms of reference to the next meeting in March to look at the different things, and obviously I'll consult with you, Chair, and panel members on what you'd like to look at. But obviously it doesn't mean that you can't invite somebody along to the next meeting to give some information whilst those are kind of being discussed. So it's a case of where you would like to go next, whether you would like to get kind of an update from another area for the next meeting, or whether you'd like to get somebody along to give us some further information on carers. It's what you would like to do, Chair and the panel.
Well, I'll leave it open to the panel, but I would like somebody else to come along and explain to us what, I mean, we know what the carers do, and they obviously do a fantastic job, but it's worrying that 81% of them have taken on more care, for example. 64% have not had a break during the pandemic and so on. Those figures are quite worrying. So can we get someone else to even give us more information and let us move forward and try and help these people?
Chair, if it's okay, I think it was interesting to hear about the carers, but also I think it would be interesting, like the question that you asked Lynn was, what can we do to help you as a local authority? So it would be quite interesting to know if you and the panel are in agreement, like how many social workers we do have, what caseloads are we looking at for the support that we give carers, and what kind of, I suppose, volumes of sort of, trying to think, it's not interest, what sort of word am I looking for, kind of, you know, inquiries they get on sort of a monthly basis or a weekly basis to the support that they need. So that's potentially one area that you could look at for the next meeting. So we could look at, and also as well, it's the breakdown of carers. So how many carers do we have age, I don't know, between, yeah, I suppose, I presume that the panel would want to look at kind of older carers, like adult carers being the adult scrutiny panel, but it's kind of that information. That's just a suggestion to the panel of what, if you'd like to look, you know, get some more kind of nitty-gritty information before we move on to the next thing, but it's entirely up to yourselves. I know that Councillor Rooney and Jeanette Walker would like to make a comment, Chair.
I'll just make one more point on Ace and Jeanette, and then you can come in. Would it be possible to get a carer in? Somebody who's actually a carer, an older one, obviously, because we're out of social care, and hear their story, because we always invite the people that are above them, and they tell us what's happening. But as somebody on ground level, if we had an old carer in, and he or she could tell us what it's like being a carer and what they need. Would that be advisable or not?
I'm sure that that's something that we could look at for a future meeting, Chair. And I think that with an important topic, it would seem dismissive of us not to invite the carers along to give their story. So I think it's something that we could definitely look at.
Okay, Denise.
Yeah, thanks. Just taking Susie's points a bit further on. I think we raised it last time, but I'd like to see somebody from the benefits side, whether it's in-house or external, to talk about what financial support is available to carers. And in terms of the age, I'm not sure where our age is. I know it's an adult social care panel, but where does that age start? Because I would quite like to see somebody younger. And if we could get somebody at around 18, because they're possibly been caring for somebody while they've been a child, and we can maybe get that perspective as well. And I know it's outside of our remit a little bit, but I think, you know, that transition about how much help is available for somebody as they start to grow up, because we were talking about people getting older and needing their care, but maybe somebody at the other end of the spectrum. All right, thanks. So
I have no problem with that, Susie. Jeanette.
Sorry, Chair. Sorry, Jeanette. Could I just come in there? I mean, one of the two is there's never any. You can always kind of look at a comparison. So you could always ask about what supports available for older carers and what supports there for younger carers, and that's always a good way to kind of look at it. But again, I'll draw up some detailed terms of reference and I'll bring them back to the next meeting, and then we'll go from there, because there's a lot of things that we could look at, but if we looked at everything it would go like this. I think we need to really really narrow down what the panel want to look at specifically. But as I said, there's a lot of discussion and thinking to do. So I'll definitely bring back some terms of reference to the next meeting.
Well,
Okay, thanks,
I think Denise, you were on a young carer looking after older people.
No, I was trying to keep it to the age bracket and wondering where we actually start as an adult in terms of this committee, and if we start at around 18. So do we have anybody we can identify who's providing care at that age, because they're going to be going through college and school and stuff, and to look at the support that might be available there for them. Thanks.
Okay, Jeanette.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. Yes, right, Susie. Yeah, I think you're correct. We do need the terms of reference sorting out as well. One of the areas that I'm quite concerned about now, looking at what's been happening this past year with carers, and when you look at the mental health issues and on that first page that was given to us regarding these support for carers, 64% not had a break during the pandemic, and also 64% again said about their mental health has been impacted by COVID. So I'd like to see what we're going to do to address those concerns. We can't leave everything to one particular agency to deal with. I think we need to find out how we're going to do that, and I think what the effects of the pandemic are going to cause on carers who might end up being cared for themselves, or just I think that we need to look at the mental health issue as well, and the respite as well for the carers. So that needs to be looked at, because as Eric said, that's not been available to many people during this particular time. And I would imagine that people are starting to really pull their hair out now with the pressures of COVID, the pressures of being isolated, and also having to shield as well, I would imagine, during that particular time. So it's going to be a lot to look at for social services and adult social services. All right. Just wanted to make that point. I think Lynn Beavers might help us regarding getting a carer. Maybe if a couple of carers from different age ranges would be a good idea. I think Denise is right. You might have an 18-year-old who's trying to do college, university, or whatever, and also still complete their caring duties as well. So I think quite right there, Denise. So, and also maybe an older one who are looking after a young person who needs their care. All right.
Okay, Susie, let Graham come in, and then I know you've got a lot of material there, and we'll break it down for the next meeting, but we'll let Graham come in first. Graham?
Yeah, just going on what Denise and Jeanette are saying there. Are we talking about cares in the community, family carers going like from 18-year-old? Are we going to be talking about the likes of independent supported living places where you get a lot of 18-year-olds at students actually going at a crust while they're going through college? They do a lot, and they are that young, and they are sort of going from 18 up to, I don't know, 50, which I've come across around about. Then you get care in the community. You get a lot of 18-year-olds doing care in the community. They're trying to just earn a little bit of extra to put them through college. So there's a lot of pressure on young and middle-aged or carers in that way. It's not about that way, it's worth having a look at that as well.
Okay, thank you, Graham. Right, so let's break down what we're going to do for the next meeting. You've got a lot of information there. I would like to have two carers in, if everybody would agree to that, a young one and an old one, and hear what it's like for them and what we can do to help them. But
with your permission, Chair, I think that it might be worth looking at some of the kind of like the information before we invite the carers along. I think that sometimes it's easier to we've kind of had a brief overview of the support for carers, but I think we need to get a bit more in-depth information. So for example, Lynn was talking about kind of the Care Act, and within that there was like 5 key kind of principles, I think she was saying, about what the Care Act has to, what our responsibility through the Care Act is, and it might be worth kind of the next meeting kind of saying, kind of getting more of a broad perspective to say, okay, well, we've got the Care Act, what does the council do to do these things, and then also ask a bit more information about what about the age ranges, what age is classed as an adult, because I know obviously it's very different, especially with kind of young people. You've got, I know that the responsibility for children's services is you've got its ages like 0 to 18, but then you've got up to the age of 25 if they're a young carer. So I think we need to understand kind of where an adult starts. But that's just my view. I mean, obviously I'm happy to go with whatever the panel wants me to do, but I just feel that sometimes getting a little bit more background information before you delve into kind of the personal views is probably the best way to go forward with that. And it also gives the service area a little bit more time to kind of talk to the carers and identify those that would be happy to share their story. And also it's a bit different this time because obviously they're not just in a room with a panel, they're on they're on a live kind of, well, they're live, so it's a case of whether, yeah, and obviously scrutiny is transparent and open, so we wouldn't particularly want to go into a closed forum. So it's a case of kind of identifying those people who would be happy to do that in kind of this environment. But that's just my view.
Yeah, well, I agree with you. I think it'd be difficult to get a couple of carers in on this sort of WebEx thing. But I'm sure there will be a couple because we're not asking them to give us an update on anything. We will ask them questions. It'll be easy. They won't have to have a presentation or anything. We'll just ask them questions. But that's, well, I'll agree with you, Susie. We'll look into it more. But I definitely would like some carers to come in on a future date. Jeanette?
Yeah, based on that, Chair, yeah, I agree with you, yeah. I think what we should do is maybe maybe Susie could put terms of reference, if possible, with working with yourself, obviously, and the Vice Chair. And then, of course, have a programme of how many meetings you think this might take, and then maybe programme the carers in at a suitable time and a juncture within the panel's investigations. One of the things you've quite rightly said is about the Care Act of 2014 and the significant rights of carers. And I think this is significant rights of the carers that we've got to address. And I think we can actually look at each of those strands as part of our references, Susie. All right, so I think that's what you were hinting at, Susie.
Oh,
so,
sounds lovely. Walker, thank you very much. Yeah, that I was thinking that when I was looking at the strands, I thought that those actually identified quite good terms of reference.
Yeah, I think they would actually, and I'm looking at them. I think that would actually help to guide us through this investigation at a decent pace. I don't know how many meetings we're going to do this for, but obviously to look at the final report at the end of it, which would be very interesting. And hopefully it shouldn't take an immense amount of time, but we do need to get this done, obviously. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeanette. Right, Susie. So we'll go with you. We'll find out more, if that's okay with everybody. And then at a later date, we'll invite some carers in if they want to come. I'm sure we'll get a couple to come in and talk to us and tell us how hard their job is, etc., etc.
Thank you, Chair. I think as well, I think you will get carers in because I think as well, sometimes carers just want to share their story. Quite often, as you know, especially in the pandemic, when they're in a kind of, well, we know how we all feel. We just sometimes trapped, don't we? And I think those carers, more than anyone, feel that they don't have a release and they don't have that respite for themselves. So I think that you won't. I have a feeling that there will be people who want to come along to the panel. So I don't think we've got any problems with that. Chair, you're on mute if you don't mind. Thank you.
Okay, is everyone happy with that? We'll move on. Yep. Okay, item 6 is the Chair's OSB update. The last OSB meeting was held on the 29th of January, where the board considered to call in for the Nunthorpe Grange Farm / Church Lane. It was agreed that the budget and policy framework aspect would not be going back to full council. However, the executive considered the other aspects of the meeting yesterday. And that was the last OSB meeting. And we'll go on to item number 7, which is any other urgent items, in my opinion, and I have nothing. Has anybody got anything? Nothing. Well, once again, I thank you all very, very much for your input, as always. Have a good day, and thank you all.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, everybody.